Prepare to have your health questions answered here on Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley, owner of Binkley Healing Center in downtown Ventura. Now, here's Dr. Todd.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley, board-certified doctor of non-force chiropractic and practitioner of functional medicine. Today I'm going to be talking about thyroid conditions. I'm going to do a really exciting case study of a woman, a 48-year-old woman with hyperthyroidism, overproduction of thyroid hormone. But whenever I talk about thyroid conditions, 90% of the time we're thinking about hypothyroidism. Underproduction of the thyroid is much more common. 90+% of the time, if someone has a thyroid condition, it's very likely to be low thyroid. And this is just underdiagnosed all the time. Millions of women are not getting the care they need who have fatigue, difficulty losing weight, swelling in the hands and the feet, cold hands and feet, hair loss, dry skin. It can even raise your cholesterol levels, in fact. So it's really important to identify whether or not you even have borderline hypothyroid, because it can make a world of difference. And I've just seen this with thousands and thousands of mostly women over the past 35 years. And so if you've never had your thyroid properly checked, most doctors just test TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and they figure if that's normal, your pituitary is not telling your thyroid gland to make more thyroid, then you're probably fine. Well, TSH is a useful test, but it doesn't give you the whole picture by itself. It's important to get a full panel of thyroid tests, especially free T3. When you hear about women who have hypothyroidism and are taking thyroid medication, it's almost always the same. Synthroid levothyroxine is just the standard T4 thyroxine, the main hormone produced by the thyroid gland. But the problem with that is T4 doesn't do anything in the body. It must be converted into the active form, T3, and some of that T3 must be unbound from its carrier protein into free T3. So free T3 is what actually executes all the functions of thyroid hormone in the body. And most doctors never test that. They just assume that if your thyroid is normal, or even if your pituitary secreted thyroid stimulating hormone is normal, that you're fine. So it's important to test free T3, especially because a lot of women, even if they're on medication or if they're just borderline low thyroid, or if their thyroid tests look normal but they still have the symptoms of low thyroid, it's often because maybe they're still producing adequate thyroxine, the main thyroid hormone, T4, but they're not converting it adequately into free T3. This is very common and very commonly undiagnosed. So I'll be doing a talk on this and presenting some case histories on many patients I've seen with hypothyroidism and how much better they feel after we resolve that in a live presentation at my office. So mark your calendars. I hope you can join me on December 3rd. That's a Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. It's always I'm doing a presentation like this on the first Wednesday of every month now. Last month we did toxins. And this month, December 3rd, 6 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, we'll be doing a talk about hypothyroidism. I'll talk a little bit about hyperthyroid as well, but mostly about hypothyroidism. I'll do a 30-minute keynote presentation. We'll have some light refreshments, and then we'll have as much time as you want for questions and answers. So I'd love to meet you face-to-face, answer any questions you have, bring family and friends. We had a really good turnout last month for our toxins, and looking forward to a good turnout this coming Wednesday in a couple of weeks, December 3rd, Wednesday at 6 p.m., live in my office in downtown Ventura. So today I'm going to talk about a case study, a specific patient that I had with hyperthyroidism, overproduction of thyroid, which is much less common, but always interesting, partly just because it's less common. This is a 48-year-old woman who had been diagnosed with hyperthyroidism in her 20s. She also had two members of her family that had been diagnosed with Graves' disease. The most common type of hyperthyroidism is the autoimmune kind called Graves' disease. And when she went to her doctor back then, when she was in her 20s, he recommended removal of the entire thyroid gland. And that's just ridiculous how many times I've heard that when it's totally unnecessary. Just cut the thyroid gland out. We can just give you thyroid medication for the rest of your life. No problem. You don't need your thyroid gland. We'll just give you the drugs. Well, she didn't want to do that. Instead, she took medication for it for a year and dedicated herself to maintaining her own health. So, and she actually got it with the meds and just taking better care of herself. She got it completely under control. And she did this while undergoing the significant stress of going through med school at the time. She was in medical school in her home country when this happened. And she got rid of it. She got it to, in complete remission after about a year. Got off the meds, continued to have regular blood tests. And then more recently, a year or two ago, found out a few months ago that it had come back. So most problems with the thyroid, whether it's underactive or overactive, are usually the result of an autoimmune condition where your body is overproducing antibodies that create inflammation and eventually scar tissue in the thyroid gland, and this disrupts the ability of that gland to produce thyroid hormones. Autoimmune hypothyroid, autoimmune low thyroid is called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and autoimmune hyperthyroid, overproduction, is called Graves' disease. So this patient was already diagnosed with Graves' disease, and she was trained as a medical doctor in her home country, but was not licensed to practice here. She also knew she didn't want to take drugs again, so that's why she came to me. And I often describe functional medicine as a means of identifying earlier signs of disease before it becomes a full-blown medical condition that requires medical care, mainly pharmaceuticals, with all of their perils and sometimes amazing benefits, but usually side effects as well. So she was a trained physician, and she already knew from what she saw there and what she'd been recommended before that she didn't want to do that unless she absolutely had to. Well, this case was definitely a full-blown medical condition that most doctors would recommend medication for immediately. In America, they wouldn't recommend that they just cut her thyroid out immediately, not as a first step. But they would definitely recommend that she take medication to suppress the overproduction of thyroid hormone. Hyperthyroidism can be dangerous when it gets out of control. It can cause cardiac arrhythmias, especially atrial fibrillation, and in older patients, even heart failure. It can cause unintended weight loss, nervousness, hyperactivity, irritability, increased sweating, fatigue, very, very commonly fatigue. It also dramatically increases the risk of osteoporosis, loss of bone density, and it can cause weakness, insomnia, diarrhea, and a host of symptoms in the eyes, which we're going to come back to. It's often initially diagnosed based on some of these symptoms, blood work, and a good physical exam. Both hyper and hypothyroidism can cause a goiter, which means an enlargement of the thyroid gland, which is easy to feel in the neck, easy for a doctor to feel. Patients often don't notice they have it in the beginning, but eventually it can get so big that you can easily see it, and sometimes even from across the room. And hyperthyroidism can also famously cause the eyes to bulge. This is the condition that the actor Marty Feldman had. Marty Feldman was the bug-eyed British actor who played Igor in Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein in 1974. So not everyone with hyperthyroidism gets their bulging eyes like that, but that is one of the things that can happen if it gets out of control. So blood tests clearly show, when you run the blood work on someone with a suspected thyroid condition, the blood work will clearly show overproduction of thyroid hormones and a drastically lowered thyroid stimulating hormone, which is the pituitary hormone that controls the thyroid. If your thyroid is low, your pituitary hormone TSH will go up, telling your thyroid to make more. And if it's high, then it will do the opposite. So if you're lucky, your doctor will also order thyroid antibodies tests. Most doctors will order thyroid antibody tests if they suspect hyperthyroidism, but far too few of them ever order antibody tests for the millions of women that have hypothyroidism. But I digress. The diagnosis of hyperthyroidism is confirmed with an ultrasound, which shows the exact dimensions of the enlarged gland and any nodules or scar tissue that may have formed in it, which indicates the severity of the disease. The more scar tissue you have, or especially if you have any larger than a certain size nodules, then the worse the prognosis for the hyperthyroidism, the more likely you'll have symptoms. The activity and aggressiveness of the disease is evaluated by a thyroid scan, and this is where the gland is injected with a radioactive tracer that produces a different type of image that shows increased functional activity in the parts of the gland that are overproducing the thyroid hormone. So this patient's ultrasound showed a 53% enlargement and a chickpea-sized nodule in the left lobe of the thyroid gland. And the thyroid scan confirmed the diagnosis of Graves' disease. It showed diffuse changes throughout the gland consistent with abnormally increased activity. And this is just the inflammatory process that eventually produces scar tissue and enlargement of the gland. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You're listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Health Challenge. Today we're talking about a specific case of mine, a patient, a 48-year-old woman with hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, overactive thyroid, which can cause a lot of problems. It can be dangerous if it's uncontrolled. And she had been diagnosed with this originally in her 20s, and now it's come back in her late 40s. And she wants to try and get it under control without medication. Well, when I saw her blood tests, I told her that there was a very good chance she would need to go back on the medication because her thyroid stimulating hormone was 0.005, 100 times lower than the lower limit of normal, basically barely detectable. Her free T3, the active form of thyroid hormone, was nearly double the upper limit of normal. Her thyroid peroxidase antibodies, some of this is kind of technical, but it'll make sense here eventually, were over 5 times the upper limit of normal. And thyrotropin receptor antibody, this is just another antibody that's the most important. These are the antibodies that your body overproduces when you have an autoimmune thyroid condition. So thyrotropin receptor antibody is the most important one for hyperthyroidism, and it was 8.04, which is also 5.5 times the upper limit of normal. She also had some elevated liver enzymes, one of which was twice the upper limit of normal. Her protein levels were low, and protein is essential to heal and repair every tissue in the body. So I'm always looking at protein levels on every patient. And her white blood cell count was only 3.7, which was low because of the chronic stress on her immune system. I also tested her serum iodine levels. She had been taking a relatively high dose of iodine for a while and wondered whether that was helpful or perhaps even part of the problem. And she's not alone in being confused about this. And every situation is different. Iodine can often help a thyroid condition, especially hypothyroid, but even sometimes hyperthyroid. So her iodine level was right at the upper limit of the healthy functional range when we tested it. So I didn't recommend that she supplement it anymore. But I also was able to confirm or tell her, assure her that it was unlikely that what she was taking had aggravated her condition in any way. The upper limit of the healthy range is right where we want it. On the plus side, she looked fantastic. She was fit, otherwise super healthy. She took great care of herself. She ate a great diet. She regularly exercised. She busied herself with a rewarding career. And even though she was thin, she had the musculature of an athlete. So she was also highly motivated to do whatever it takes to reverse this disease without drugs. Some minor symptoms that she had, she was a little hyperactive, but said that she'd always been that way since childhood. She had no heart palpitations, no hypersensitivity to heat, no sweating, a little bit of fatigue, no appetite changes, no weakness, and no eye symptoms. That's usually later. She did have a rash on her lower legs, which is common with most autoimmune conditions, and she wasn't sleeping very well. So given the mildness of her symptoms and her otherwise general good health, I suggested we put her on an intensive program for 4 months to flood her body with nutrients and then retest to see how she's doing. I made sure she understood that if her numbers weren't significantly improved in 4 months, that she would have to consider going on medication, at least in the short term. And this is important because this, like many conditions, may warrant taking medication for a few weeks, a few months to get a raging condition under control. And then after that, there may be a very good chance that you can get off the medication and heal things naturally yourself with proper support. So autoimmune conditions are almost always driven in part by exposure to toxins, which is why people with autoimmune conditions often develop a rash somewhere on the body. The skin is an organ of elimination. And when it's struggling to flush out mold, chemical, and heavy metal toxins, a rash, a few little spots, many spots that merge together, redness, itchy, dry skin, or damp, oozing pustules. Any kind of rash is often the result. Most autoimmune conditions start in the gut, where stress, lousy diets, and a host of other things result in too many bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria in the gut, or this is called dysbiosis, an inflammatory process that results can allow foreign debris to leak into the bloodstream where it doesn't belong and then can migrate everywhere throughout your body. And this creates legitimate targets for your immune system to try and destroy. So your body's overproducing these antibodies for a reason. It's rightly seeing foreign debris in places it doesn't belong and is trying to attack and destroy that debris. And your healthy tissue, in this case, in the thyroid gland, gets caught in the crossfire. So if we want to address this and do a good job without give her a fighting chance to not end up on medication, we're going to need some more tests. So in addition to reviewing her scans and ordering some more extensive blood work, I also ordered a chemical toxins panel, which showed a high body burden of several significant chemical toxins. Bisphenol S, the synthetic plastic commonly found in drink containers, water bottles, toys, cosmetics, and the lining of cans of food, is a known endocrine disruptor, meaning it interferes with your endocrine organs, including, of course, the thyroid gland. Many people have heard of bisphenol A, which it raised so many health concerns that most companies removed it from their products and now promote them as BPA-free. Well, this means that if it's still plastic, this means they replaced it usually with another nearly identical plastic like bisphenol S. Slightly different chemical, which causes almost all of the same problems. So this patient had high bisphenol S. He also had high xylene, which is widely used in industry and medical laboratories. We're also constantly exposed to it through automobile exhaust and a variety of consumer products like cigarette smoke, paints, varnish, rust preservatives, rust preventatives, and shellac. Long-term effects of exposure to xylene can damage the liver and the kidneys. She also had high perchlorate in her system, not to be confused with perchloroethylene, which is the toxic solvent you may have heard of that was used in dry cleaning. This is perchlorate. Perchlorate is a chemical used in fireworks, road flares, explosives, and rocket fuel, and it enters the food supply through contaminated water used for irrigation and food processing. It's also found in milk from the presence of perchlorate in animal feed, and it famously disrupts thyroid function by inhibiting thyroid uptake of iodine. Well, even worse, these were the ones that were high. She had very high levels of something called, this is a mouthful, phenyl glyoxalic acid. This is from exposure to the plastics styrene and in the chemical ethyl benzene. So styrene is a plastic that's widely used to make plastics and rubber, which are manufactured into products like insulation, pipes, automobile parts, printing cartridges, food containers, carpeting. Exposure often occurs through food, especially fatty foods heated in styrene containers, like microwaving frozen dinners, and also through just breathing indoor air with styrene vapors from building materials, photocopiers, tobacco smoke, and many other products. It is a known neurotoxin, reproductive toxin, and increases the risk of certain cancers like leukemia and lymphoma. So this patient also had a very high body burden of, here's another mouthful, dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. This is one of the most widely used herbicides in the world for agriculture and landscaping, and it is also a known endocrine disruptor. So we definitely found some chemicals that are directly related to her symptoms. I also ordered a heavy metals test because heavy metals are things that we're all exposed to, and some of them can directly affect thyroid function, and her results came back and showed elevated lead, mercury, and especially uranium. Well, ding, ding, ding. Iodine competes for binding sites on cells with uranium, which is why iodine supplementation is a common treatment for uranium exposure. And if their body's constantly fighting with that, it's going to disrupt thyroid function. So this was further confirmation that this smart patient had been wisely choosing to take supplemental iodine in just the right amount. And the big takeaway here is most doctors never test for any of these things because they usually have no training in how to properly test for them, and they know that they're ubiquitous in the environment, so they figure even if they do show up on some test, what are you going to do about it? Well, when you identify an increased body burden of these things in a patient, it will usually motivate them to do several things. Number one, exercise more intensely. Sweating is one of the main ways your body continually flushes out toxins that you're constantly exposed to. And these toxins are part of the reason you smell bad when you sweat. And sweating out toxins is free. Number two, do saunas. People often notice that their sweat smells metallic when they do saunas. And this is because saunas are very effective at increasing your body's ability to flush out toxins. Eating better food with minerals that your body depends on to effectively excrete toxins helps, because most people are deficient in minerals, and the main source of minerals that you need are in vegetables, especially dark green leafy vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, etc. And fourthly, mainly the thing that I help people with when we do these testing and they have a severe body burden like this patient did, is you can take supplements that increase your body's ability to safely excrete these toxins, to permanently remove them from your body. So mineral-rich plant sources like chlorella and cilantro can help. Binding agents like charcoal, zeolite clay, fulvic, and humic acid. Antioxidants that support liver detoxification like glutathione, alpha-lipoic acid, and acetylcysteine, and others. One of my favorites is called pectisol, which is modified citrus pectin. And this is the sponge-like pith from orange peels, specially processed in a way that it enables it to easily cross cell membranes, bind toxins, and escort them to the kidneys where they can be flushed out in the urine. So I recommended several of these things for this hyperthyroidism patient. I also ordered a stool test. Now remember, this is a very fit, outwardly perfectly healthy 48-year-old woman who has no gastrointestinal symptoms, no gas, no bloating, nausea, constipation, or diarrhea at all. But she already knew why I wanted to order a stool test, because she listened to past episodes of this show and learned something that she was never taught in medical school. Most autoimmune conditions start in the gut, and natural healing of them is rarely effective without addressing the gut and restoring a healthy gut microbiome. So her stool test showed very mild dysbiosis, slight deficiency in a few important beneficial bacteria, and a mild to moderate increase in a number of bacteria that could cause problems. She also had slightly elevated yeast, shown under the microscope. And these results basically showed two things. She doesn't have raging, out-of-control gut inflammation or super high levels of bad bacteria. Both of these things make her prognosis better. And given this and her general health, other factors are likely the primary drivers of her current autoimmunity, especially the toxins that we just talked about. So what did we do? Well, I recommended some basic nutrients to optimize general health, which I do for everyone. A good multivitamin to provide essential minerals that are usually lacking. Vitamin D and vitamin K2 for immune system support and prevention of osteoporosis that she's at risk of. Fish oil for omega-3 fatty acids that everyone needs for general health, reducing inflammation and protecting the cardiovascular system. I also recommended some betaine hydrochloric acid to help her stomach absorb more of the good protein she was already eating. I recommended a good probiotic and some prebiotic fiber and antioxidants to feed the healthy bacteria in her gut, and a natural antimicrobial to kill off the excessive yeast. I also recommended some L-carnitine and magnesium with malic acid to protect the heart, reduce nervousness and insomnia, and modified citrus pectin and binding agents that I spoke about earlier to help flush out the toxins we discovered. I also recommended she was already taking chlorella that she'd begun. I recommended she continued that. I recommended a product called Lauricidin, which is one of my favorite products for immune system support that reliably boosts low white cell counts. Well, we did follow-up blood work 4 months later, and the results were amazing. But we're about out of time, so you'll have to tune in next week to find out the details, because they are lengthy. It takes a little bit to describe everything that happened, and they are really exciting. I've never done that before. Sorry, this was a long case history, but it's an exciting one, so I hope you will tune in next week. In the meantime, I'll remind you again, please join me Wednesday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. for a live presentation in my office about thyroid conditions. I'll do a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation. We'll have some light refreshments and plenty of time for answering any questions you may have. Have a fantastic weekend.
You've been listening to Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley. If you have a health question you want discussed on the show, email your health questions to Dr. Binkley at binkleyhealingcenter.com. Take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions for yourself and for your loved ones, because our health matters. Join him next Friday at 2 p.m. for safe, effective natural solutions here on 98.3 FM, The Word.